for attending today's webinar. My name is Carrie Daly. I'm a marketing specialist with Atlantis Computing. We will be beginning the webinar shortly. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Accelerate Your VDI Sales with Atlantis Computing. We will be now beginning our webinar. I would like to introduce Adrian, our channel manager for the UK and Nordics.
Thank you, Kerry. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining this webinar. As you just heard, the focus of today's webinar is how to accelerate your VDI sales with Atlantis Computing. I'm Adrian Grunewald. I look after the channel business for the UK and the Nordic region for Atlantis Computing. During the course of this morning's webinar, we'll do a brief introduction to Atlantis for those of you who are new to Atlantis Computing. And then we will talk around some of the challenges around deploying virtual desktops. The main focus of this morning's webinar is going to zone in around persistent desktops, but we'll also touch on some issues which are relevant to both persistent and non-persistent desktops. And by the end of the webinar, you'll hopefully have a good understanding of how Atlantis Computing can help you to improve any issues with existing VDI environments within your customer base, reduce the cost of VDI projects, make more VDI projects viable at the same time as delivering a better overall experience for your VDI customers and prospects. Atlantis Computing are a US headquartered software company with our headquarters in Mountain View in California. We as a company exist to virtualize and optimize virtual data center workloads. Today that primarily focuses on VDI deployments and hosted shared desktops with our XenApp products and our diskless and persistent VDI products. We have offices in and around Europe and globally. Today we have roughly 130 resellers, but that's growing pretty fast. So if you are new to Atlantis and are interested in being a reseller, then let us know and we can work with you to allow you to take advantage of this technology. As an organization, we have seen very, very rapid growth last year and this year. And from a standing start in 2009, we're now up to in excess of 350 customers and well over 400,000 licenses of our software sold to date. Last year was something of a breakthrough year in terms of Atlantis, both in terms of bringing new products to market, in terms of industry recognition from various industry commentators such as Brian Madden and other well-known bloggers, and also from our key partners. So our solutions are their View product and also Citrix with their Zen Desktop and their XenApp products. And in 2012 at VMworld in the US, our Ilio diskless VDI product won Best of Show. In the same year at VMworld in Europe, we won Best of Show there, and that was based around our deployment with a large UK-based telco and hosting company called Colt Telecom. Also in the same year, we were voted Best of Synergy 2012, again for our Atlantis Ilio diskless VDI product, as well as in the Storage Magazine Product of the Year category, getting awarded the silver medal in that category as well. We have many strategic relationships. The two real key ones in the context of today's webinar are with Citrix and VMware, but we also have strong relationships with Cisco directly and through their VCE Alliance. Also many hardware vendors such as Dell, IBM, HP, and more recently NetApp all have reference architectures in place with us, and that also extends to some of the newer storage vendors such as Violin Memory and others. As far as deployments go, our technology is designed to scale from small deployments up to multi-thousand seat deployments. And some of the largest VDI deployments in the world and XenApp deployments in the world are now based upon Atlantis's Ilio technology. So our biggest deployment, which runs in excess of 100,000 seats, is with JP Morgan Chase, but the Colt Telecom, which was the award-winning deployment, which is growing very rapidly in the UK, and also many other organizations ranging from healthcare organizations right through to government organizations, the US Army, and many more. If we have a look at the makeup of what makes a successful VDI project these days, there are many different groups that have an interest in that success, and those groups all have different requirements. So as users, expectation has changed in terms of what they expect from their IT infrastructure. I myself have a Macbook Air with a solid-state drive, and I have very fast bandwidth in my home office, and therefore that is the sort of user experience I expect wherever I am and whenever I connect. Also, as users, we all have multiple devices, and we like to be able to access our IT, our email, our applications when we are out and about, not just when we are sitting at our desk. So from a user perspective, we have to allow access anytime, anywhere. We have to give our users the ability to connect when they are not in the office, and we have to offer a user experience that meets changing user expectations and user expectations that have been heavily influenced by this multitude of flash-based devices that many users have outside of their office environments today. IT organizations generally want things to be very simple operationally. They want to know that the management of their environment is simple, that they just have a small number of images to manage, a small number of processes to work with. They need to ensure that their infrastructure is robust, that if there are any unforeseen issues, that they have the ability to recover or avoid any downtime as a result of those issues, and that extends from the data center right down to the user. They want to know that the technology they deploy is going to be reliable, it's going to be proven technology, and it's going to be very simple to manage. And then the final piece of the triangle, and this is generally the one who tends to wield a lot of the power. It's the person with their hands on the purse strings. So typically the CFO or the IT director, they, while wanting to enable the business through IT, are very concerned with making sure that the cost of that deployment is kept as low as possible, and that any existing IT assets are sweated to the maximum capability. So specifically to desktop deployments, they want to keep the CapEx lower than a PC if possible. They want to reduce or avoid any additional operational expenses within the data center, rack space, power, cooling, management overhead, training costs, all those costs associated with IT deployment. And they want to know that they have visibility of all upfront costs, that there are no hidden surprises, there are no unexpected additional costs when they are deploying new infrastructure via the IT team. There are a number of challenges and risks with any VDI deployment. One of the biggest one of those risks is around cost and complexity within the infrastructure. And typically, that cost tends to be very much centered around storage and around storage connectivity. One of the key success factors of any virtual desktop deployment is delivering a user experience that is acceptable to users. We, with many of the conversations we have with customers now, see that as having to be better than a physical PC. And in order to do that with some of the traditional approaches to VDI deployments, there is a big cost and complexity penalty to be paid at the infrastructure level. There are also many, many risks involved with virtual desktop deployments. Risks around the fact you're going from potentially a physical to a virtual environment, risks around applications, risks around how you deploy, how quickly you can deploy, risk around complexity with that deployment, risks around how long it can take you to get from your current state to your desired state. And with those risks comes cost and comes potential operational and business impact. So making sure that you can make a transition as simply with a minimum amount of complexity is key to the success of a project. The other challenge from a VDI perspective is if it is a large environment or an environment that is continuing to scale, how do you go about managing that multitude of desktops? How do you go about ensuring that there's still a consistent user experience with scale, as you add more users? How do you ensure that your infrastructure can cope, and how do you ensure you scale that environment without incurring too many additional costs or without sacrificing user experience, performance, and so forth? And the final challenge is, how do you deliver high availability? Suddenly, if you're grouping all your users together on shared infrastructure, the potential failure domain and the potential impact of that increases greatly. Therefore, you need to ensure that the users are protected within that environment. If you have a look at the historical causes of VDI project failures, and we're talking about persistent VDI, but equally these same challenges apply to non-persistent VDI deployments as well. And according to Gartner and many other analysts, the #1 challenge associated with any shared hosted virtual desktop or VDI deployment is the lack of storage planning, resulting then higher than expected storage costs. One thing I see time and time again is users working on the basis that they have a 30 gigabyte image on their local hard drive, then, and they've got 100 users with that image, then it's simple that that's how much storage they need in a virtual desktop deployment. But the reality of it is the storage is what drives the user experience. So storage sizing within virtual desktop needs to be based on user experience, on I/O delivery, and not on capacity. And typically with most VDI storage costs, we see it as representing 40 to 60% of the budget. And in many cases, we see this as being a barrier to entry. So organizations can see the operational value of moving to a virtual desktop environment, but when they start to drill down into what they need from a storage perspective in order to deliver a viable and acceptable user experience within that environment to allow the business to continue to operate as effectively, then the storage costs stop many projects in their tracks. So that said, hopefully by the end of today's webinar, you will see that that no longer needs to be the case, and there may be projects that you have discussed with your customers previously that have fallen by the wayside, which can be brought back to life, or there may be projects where your customer has deployed and has had to compromise on storage to the detriment of user experience, which can now be rescued. So this data came from a Gartner survey done in July called Attacking the High Cost of Desktop Virtualization, and the graph illustrates very obviously the storage cost associated with that. So cost needs to be... Yep.
We can't see your slide.
Really?
Yes.
I'm glad you said that. Can you see them now?
Yes.
Okay.
Much better. Thank you.
So recap, we talked about the user challenges, the IT organization challenges, and VDI and the IT challenges. We talked about the risks around cost and complexity, around user experience being key to that. We talked about how to manage VDI at scale and how to deliver, how important it is to deliver HA and rapid recovery. And we just talked about the challenges according to Gartner of and the causes of persistent VDI project failure, and that cost should be a key factor when balanced against user experience, so within an acceptable budget being able to deliver that user experience. So what does Atlantis bring to solve those problems? First of all, we can deliver a persistent or non-persistent virtual desktop lower than the cost of a physical PC. We can also enable virtual desktops to be deployed, performing at a very high user experience level, faster than a physical PC, and taking advantage of those existing end user devices. So without the need to necessarily have to refresh the desktop, or on new devices, be those desktops, be those laptops, or be those thin clients. We have very powerful automation and sizing tools within our solution. So we can deploy thousands and thousands and thousands of desktops across multiple racks, across multiple servers, optimized in terms of the infrastructure available to underpin that, the CPU resource, the memory resource, and we can do it incredibly quickly at scale. So a faster deployment and faster time to value in terms of that IT deployment. In terms of proven management at scale, I talked at the beginning about some of the deployments, 100,000 seat deployments right down to 200 seat deployments. We can scale from the very small to the very large, but with a high level of simplicity, a high level of automation, a high level of management automation, capabilities around monitoring, management alerts, etc. And again, we can simplify HA and disaster recovery within that environment. I'm going to show you a couple of examples now of VDI deployments and the impact of the Atlantis ILIO technology on VDI deployments. So in this example, the challenge was 1,000 users. The cost per desktop for a persistent VDI deployment where everyone has their own virtual desktop image that continues to persist every time they log on. So what they found was, looking at traditional storage, the cost per desktop was anything between $1,000 to $2,000 when they wanted to deploy it in such a way to achieve PC-like performance. With Atlantis ILIO, we were able to cut the CapEx and OpEx of that deployment by up to 80%. So if you look at the table at the bottom half of the slide, you'll see the number of input-output operations per second, which is the typical barometer of user experience in VDI. Without Atlantis ILIO, they are based on sizing of around 30 IOPS per second. And for context, with a typical physical device, you would probably, a local physical PC, you would expect to see about 75 IOPS per second. The total storage cost for that deployment based on those thousands of users was $1.25 million. With Atlantis ILIO, the number of IOPS per desktop was able to burst up to 5,000 IOPS, a hugely improved user experience, and the storage cost was down to $381,000. So we were able to deliver very high levels of I/O by using RAM in the server. We were able to reduce the storage costs by around 70%, so that was an $800,000 saving in storage, and the cost per desktop came in considerably lower. And the other thing was, without Atlantis ILIO, the viability of this project from a budgetary and financial point of view, it would not have got off the ground. In terms of looking a little further at user experience, traditionally with VDI deployments, what you tend to see to try and make the numbers stack up is sizing of maybe between 10 and 30 IOPS. If an organization is generous, maybe up to 50 IOPS. And as I said, compare that with a PC. So you know, anything from kind of 75, 80 right up to 150 IOPS from a physical PC. With Atlantis Ilio, as I said, we're getting faster performance than a MacBook Air with a local SSD. So these are just some disk performance benchmarks on some testing that has been done. So this shows a VDI sized for 50 IOPS. This shows VDI with Atlantis Ilio, which is 5 times faster than the MacBook Air that you see immediately above the green line at the bottom. From a flexibility perspective, trying to integrate a persistent VDI into an existing environment can bring a lot of complexity around storage, around network options, around storage tiering, around how you manage I/O. There's a lot of potential for bottlenecks. There's a lot of potential for issues around network latency. There may be additional costs or requirements around network components to enable this VDI. With Atlantis Ilio, we can simply fit into any existing environment from a storage perspective. There is no need to modify anything, no need to change anything. We can sit right into that existing environment. So if you look at a traditional persistent VDI, which is invariably delivered by using physical shared storage, some kind of expensive tier 1 SAN, with Atlantis Ilio, we have a number of options in terms of storage usage. We can use RAM in the server. We can use that as either primary storage, or we can use it as a storage tier to optimize before going out to either local flash storage or some kind of external SAN or NAS storage. So complete flexibility within the architecture to either take out the need for external storage or to massively reduce the performance workload and what is required from that external storage. In terms of deployment time, the biggest challenge around deployment time tends to be when you're moving from a physical to a virtual environment, whether it's moving to a stateless VDI environment or a persistent VDI environment. If it's a stateless VDI environment, a lot of the complexity tends to focus around applications. Can you virtualize those applications? How will they behave when virtualized? The testing overhead, and it's a very, very lengthy and cumbersome process and complex process to get to a stateless desktop. Going to a persistent desktop, while there's less complexity and it can overcome some of the challenges around operational challenges, around testing and so forth, there is still a certain amount of complexity. By deploying Atlantis Ilio, deploying that software within the hosts and taking advantage of all those automation features, all those sizing features, and taking away all that complexity, you can go live in weeks. The bottom right-hand corner of this slide was a statement from one of our customers, a large legal customer. Their deployment was ahead of the London Olympics for 2012. During the London Olympics, they wanted all their lawyers to be able to work out of the office. They had a virtual desktop deployment. They were struggling. It was not able to deliver what they needed. So from initially contacting Atlantis, within 2 weeks, via the partner, they had deployed 1,400 virtual desktops using Atlantis Ilio and delivering a very, very, very fast user experience. So again, just re-emphasizing that there is a considerable amount of planning and thought, particularly from the storage side, that needs to be done around virtual desktop deployments. We can help reduce that considerably. Some of the other risks around virtual deployment tend to come around storage sizing. So very often, for example, we would see a proof of concept that has been run, and maybe a proof of concept has been run based on a small number of users. And with that small number of users, they may find that their storage infrastructure is delivering quite a reasonable user experience. But when it comes to move from proof of concept to larger scale deployment, suddenly the impact on the response from the storage in terms of the I/O delivery and in terms of the ability to meet user SLAs, the more users are on that storage, on that system, the greater the impact across the entire user estate. With Atlantis Ilio, because we are part of every host within the environment, it allows you to scale without any negative impact, predictable performance, and actually, because we take advantage of CPU and memory within the host, as you refresh the hosts over time, we only get better over time. So in terms of summarizing the impact of Atlantis Ilio on a VDI deployment that you put to your customer, we can bring the cost per desktop to below that of a PC. We can deliver a lightning fast user experience. We can offer a much simpler infrastructure which is enabled to be delivered faster and those desktops to be delivered faster. We simplify the architectures, we de-risk all the guesswork around sizing. We offer very, very high levels of scalability, adding the ability to add users without a negative impact on the overall user estate. In terms of some of the use cases, so for greenfield deployment, we make more of those greenfield deployments viable. We make the costs add up, we simplify it, and we help you transact the business with your customers faster, and the end result is happier customers. For existing deployments where there are challenges or issues or problems, again, we're very simple to put into an existing environment to help overcome any of those user experience and performance problems that they may have, and to free up some of their existing storage estate to be redeployed for other areas of the business. For hosted shared desktop or XenApp, again, the benefits we deliver with our VDI environment are equally relevant to our hosted shared desktop environment. We take away the customer's need shared storage for their virtualized XenApp environment. We can just take advantage of RAM and the server, and we can optimize the existing storage. We can take away all the risk around sizing, around write cache creep for XenApp environments. This really kind of shows the impact from a storage capacity perspective of deploying Atlantis Ilio into a persistent VDI environment. Typically, we see anything up to 97% storage consolidation. We increase the density, so more virtual desktops per blade. We can get far more virtual desktops per disk or per spindle on your customer's existing storage environment. We can deliver 5 times faster desktop performance, steady state 297 IOPS per desktop with the ability to burst up to a much greater level as applications are launched, etc. against 10 to 30 IOPS with a typical VDI environment. So I'm just going to look briefly at a couple of the existing customer deployments and talk a little bit about them. So US Army Medical Command Center, they had 8,800 doctors and nurses based both in hospitals in the US and also in Germany and mainland Europe. They had clinical applications that they wanted to virtualize across hospitals. Storage was a bottleneck with their traditional storage deployment, and that manifested itself in very poor virtual desktop deployment. So they built a solution with Citrix FlexClass, Ilio for XenApp, and also Ilio for VDI. The HP consulting team was leading that, and the final deployment was Ilio on HP Blades with NetApp storage. As you can see from the statement made by the organization, they were able to offload 80% of the IOPS in their testing, and when they deployed, they were able to reduce the storage capacity required to support those virtual desktops by 85% and deliver a much faster response time, which meant more time with patients. This is a large financial institution, Washington Trust Bank. We also have many, many other financial customers such as JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, and many more. So if you have finance customers that are looking to deploy its tried and trusted technology, Washington Trust Bank, again, they had performance issues. They wanted to move forward with VDI, but without the impact of CapEx from a storage perspective. Initially, they were looking at a 500 user deployment, but when they got to about 90 users, suddenly they saw this performance really drop off. And that was the point that I was alluding to, where as you may do a POC, start small, but as you scale, then suddenly you start to see the impact of scale. So through deploying Atlantis Ilio into the environment, they were able to reduce the back-end IOPS from 3,500 IOPS to about 350 on the SAN. They were able to get 5 times more users on the same EMC storage platform, 875% increase in IOPS from available to the desktop, and a massive reduction in storage capacity. Finally, in the medical space, and again, we have many, many medical customers across US and within Europe who are deploying Atlantis Ilio. And again, the business challenges they were trying to solve were around CapEx and OpEx. They had Fusion I/O cards which they deployed, but they were only able to get a finite number of users on each Fusion I/O card. So they added Atlantis software, Atlantis Ilio software to their environment. It was VMware View running on vSphere, and they were able to increase the density per host from 30 to 200 users per Fusion I/O card, and in doing so, accordingly reduced the cost per desktop to $400 from $1,800, so a 95% overall drop in storage capacity. So in summary, why is Atlantis Ilio software unique? We are a software-based solution that delivers lowest cost per desktop faster than a PC. We're the only solution for both VDI and XenApp that can be deployed with no external storage, or we can complement and optimize existing storage within that deployment to allow 4 to 10 times more users on any shared storage, SSD, flash, or internal storage. We de-risk projects, eliminate human errors around deployment through automating the deployment and simplifying the deployment and taking the guesswork. From a project migration point of view, around 60% of VDI projects tend to be persistent, according to the analysts. Getting to a persistent VDI deployment is the quickest way to get from physical to virtual. Getting to a stateless VDI deployment tends to be the sort of panacea or utopia. We enable customers to quickly get away from a physical estate to a virtual estate by allowing them to very quickly migrate to persistent desktops, and then it buys them the time to do all their application testing and the other testing to decide which of those candidates would be suitable for stateless desktops. So all of this just with software, host-based virtual machine, takes advantage of server resources and can be deployed in minutes. So final slide, proven technology at scale, powering the largest deployments in the world. Significant reduction in CapEx and OpEx costs, multiple awards and plaudits, and trusted virtualization experts. All our people come from a virtualization background. We understand the space. We can work with you to help deploy in your customer environments. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, I can take those questions now. Okay, so it seems we have no questions unless you're all muted. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining the webinar today, and we will be doing more webinars following up from this on other topics. We will notify you as to those closer to the time. You can download various documentation around our solution from atlantiscomputing.com, and again, if you're interested in furthering partner discussions, there is a partner section on the website, or you can email me directly and I can point you in the right direction at adrian@atlantiscomputing.com. Many thanks and have a good day.